Tina walked through the forest. She had been bored for too long and no one wanted to entertain her, so she had gone here instead. At least no one tried to get her to do something on the farm when she was here. She had been forced to be with her grandparents on their farm the whole summer. Maybe even become longer, because her parents were out working outside of town. And as you can imagine, there wasn't much to do on the countryside when you were a 13-year-old girl who only knew the city and the fun of it. She had kicked and screamed, then begged her parents not to do it. She didn't want to spend the summer with her grandparents. I mean, it was okay for a week, but not several months. She didn't want to go there. She would be bored to death. No one would want her, and all her friends in the city would have forgotten about her by the time she would be back. But her parents hadn't listened. They had to work, they said. They had to bring in the money, and right now, as the economy looked, they just had to go wherever the money was, which meant that Tina would have to spend some time with her grandparents. And she wouldn't die, they said. It wasn't so long, and anyway, she used to love to spend time with her grandparents. But Tina had protested and said that was when she was 5 years old, not now when she was almost an adult. What was there to do on the farm? Milk cows? No way. But they had refused to listen, and nothing more could be done. They had dropped her off by the farm on their way to work, wished her good luck, and said that of course she would find something to do. She just had to stop sulking. Which made Tina vow that she would sulk until they came back, just to make sure they knew how horrible time she had had there. That had been 2 months ago. By now she had stopped counting the days and weeks and just given up any hope of ever returning to the city. She was doomed. Her friends would have forgotten about her and no one would ever love her again. This was her fate. She kicked a stone as she walked. The sun shone through the trees and it reminded her of her summers here as a girl. She'd loved the forest, and she still secretly did. I mean, not that she would have told anyone, but that was the truth, deep inside. The stone she kicked hit another stone and shot off into the forest. And it landed with a crunch. Tina stopped. Why had there been a crunch? There was nothing in this forest that would give a crunchy sound. She stepped into the forest towards where the stone had fallen. And there was something shimmering on the ground, and she leaned forward to take a closer look. She remembered nothing after that. The people on the farm would start looking for her in a couple of hours, but she wouldn't be anywhere to be found. She had disappeared from the surface of the earth, it seemed like. Tina was on her hands and knees in the snow. Her head was spinning, and she had to steady herself on the ground. What just happened? Where was she? A high-pitched voice chanted nearby, "You came! You came!" Tina tried to turn her head in the direction of the sound, but the world started to spin and she had to look down again. Why was she in the snow? How had she come here? The last she remembered, she'd been walking in the forest on a summer's afternoon. The shrill voice chanted again, "You came! You came! I didn't fall from a tree! You came!" She tried to lift her head in the direction of the voice again, and this time the world remained still. And on a branch, not far from her, was a squirrel, dancing and jumping in the snow. "I didn't fall from a tree! And I didn't eat all the bear's mushrooms! The signs were right! I'm not crazy! You came! You came! You're our savior!" Tina closed her eyes and shook her head. A talking, chanting squirrel. Had she fallen from a tree, and this was all just a dream? And where was she, and what was this forest? She opened her eyes again. Everything still looked the same. She was in a forest, in the snow. She looked up at the branch and, yeah, there was a squirrel dancing there. "Come with me! Come with me!" it said. She looked away, ignoring it. This could not be real. It had to be a dream. And she would not acknowledge an incoherent, chanting squirrel dancing on a branch. That would be to go too far. It had to be a bad dream. "The signs were right! No one listened to me! They thought I'd fallen from a tree! But you came! You came! I was right! You're our savior!" The shrill voice rang through the forest, but Tina ignored it. Instead, she stood up and looked around. She was in a forest. She didn't recognize it at all. It didn't have the friendliness of the forest at her grandparents', but a sinister feeling to it and a wildness. You didn't go wandering around in this forest by yourself, she thought. "You need to come! Hurry! They will find you here! Come, follow me!" Tina shivered. What would she do? She would die if she stayed just here. Her summer dress was whipping in the wind and she had already lost sensation in her toes. "Hurry! Hurry! They will come!" She didn't know who they were, but she didn't want to stay alone in this forest. Maybe following a talking squirrel was a better option? To where? She quivered. "To our friends!" And that was it. She couldn't go back now, could she? She had just replied to a talking, chanting squirrel. She must be losing her mind. She looked around. The sun was almost going down and the forest was getting darker and darker. The squirrel was already on its way into the forest and, with a sigh, she followed. They had walked for a while when the squirrel suddenly stopped and looked at her. "What's your name?" she asked. I'm Tina," Tina answered, shivering. And you?" "I'm Ratatosk. Come now." Tina regretted having spoken the moment she'd finished. You shouldn't ask a talking squirrel about their name, or anything else for that matter. It can't be a good sign talking to someone like that. "Hurry! Hurry! The wolves will come! They must know you're here already! She can sense it!" Who can sense it? Tina asked. "The Witch Queen! She must know you're here!" And with that, Ratatos continued jumping further into the forest, and Tina followed, not fully understanding what was happening. When the darkness was almost complete, Ratatosk stopped and announced, "We're here!" Tina looked around, shivering. She saw nothing different, only forest and trees around them. What do you mean? Where's here? She was so cold now when the sun was down, and just hoped that here would mean a fire. It didn't matter any longer that it would be a fire together with Ratatosk. It was better than being in the forest, cold and hunted by some unknown witch queen. "With our friend," Ratatosk replied. "Faye lives here, and we can stay with Faye." I can't see any friends, or anyone else for that matter," Tina protested. "Because Faye lives up there!" Ratatosk cried and pointed up in the tree she sat in. Tina looked up, but she saw only branches. "You need to climb! And quick! They will come for you! They're already on their way looking for you! Tina was just about to protest that she couldn't see any house to climb towards when she heard wolves howling in the distance. You see? They are coming! Hurry! Climb the tree! And that decided it. House or no house, she couldn't stay where she was. So Tina got hold of the lowest branch and swung herself up. Come now! Ratatosk was already up. Tina soon lost sight of the squirrel, but she kept climbing. The darkness was complete now, and she had to feel each branch before she stepped up. Then suddenly she heard Ratatosk's shrill voice next to her. We're here! Stay! I'll go and talk to my friend! Tina heard Ratatosk disappearing up the tree, and she followed the sound with her gaze. And yeah, up there she saw a weak light and something that looked like a treehouse. She heard a knock on the door and a creak as it opened. I found her! She came! Our savior is here! I didn't fall from a tree, I found her! I found her! Ratatosk. What are you talking about? Tina heard a voice say. You did fall from a tree again, didn't you? Or did you eat old bear's mushrooms? The voice seemed to belong to someone who had had this conversation many times before and was bored of it. No! I didn't eat his mushrooms! She came! Our savior came! She's really here! But why would I believe you now, Ratatosk? You have fallen from a tree before, many times. The signs have never been right. But this time they are! I promise! I didn't fall from a tree, the signs were right! She's here now, I will show you! Let us in! How many times have you seen the signs, Ratatosk? But this time it's real! She's really here! Go away, Ratatosk, you bring bad luck. Please! Let us in! No! I'll owe you a favor! They went silent for a moment, and then Tina heard a creaking of the door as it opened up more, and the voice said, So where is she then, Ratatosk? She's down there! So bring her then. Tina heard footsteps disappearing back into the house, and leaves rustling as Ratatosk jumped down the branches back down. The sound came closer until it was right next to her. We're welcome to our friend! I told you Faye would be good! Let's go! Ratatosk didn't seem to know that Tina had overheard the entire conversation, but she decided not to say anything. It seemed easier with Ratatosk. So she took hold of a branch and climbed up. And as she emerged into the light of the treehouse, she saw the friend that Ratatosk had spoken to. A strange being with ears and tail, half human and half cat. Tina tried not to stare, but the being studied her with a disinterested look. So this is the savior, huh, Ratatosk? Yes, this is her! I found her! She came! She came! The cat being sighed, then turned and walked back into the house, and Tina and Ratatosk followed her. They came into a small house, where a fire burned in the corner. Tina shivered violently now. She was so cold, and all she could think about was to get warm. But the cat being didn't pay her any attention. Faye just went to sit in front of the fire and left them standing in the small hallway. Ratatosk jumped up on the bed next to the cat being and said, I told you she would come, you need to help us. No, I won't. But why not? You know what she will do when she gets to you, don't you? She will make a collar out of you, for her coat. But we're safe here. No, we were safe. Until you came. But Lynx, please, help us. Look, she's so cold. Tina looked at them confused. They seemed to know each other at least, but I don't know if she would have called them friends. Look at her! Look how cold she is! And the cat, being called Lynx, looked at Tina for the first time since she entered. Did you fall from a tree too? Tina didn't really understand. Oh, I fell? At least? Look how cold she is! Yeah. Why are you only wearing a dress? Lynx asked. It was summer where I came from, Tina said. There wasn't any snow there. No snow? What do you mean by no snow? There is always snow here. See? I told you she wasn't from here. I told you she had come. I didn't fall from a tree. Lynx took one last look at Tina, then turned back to the fire. Tina looked at Ratatosk, who just shrugged and made an obscene gesture at Lynx's back. Should I say something? Tina thought. Ratatosk had begun to circle a finger next to her head to show what she thought about Lynx, but before Faye got the chance to see it, Tina took a step inside the hut. Please, you have to help me. Why? Lynx said. I'm cold and hunted by some witch queen. I don't know how I ended up here or even where I am. Please, I'll do anything for you. Please help us. They went silent for a moment. Then Tina heard Lynx say, Okay, deal. And Faye gestured towards the chair by the fire, then went to get a blanket and a cup of warm tea with honey. And as Tina sat there in front of the fire with the warm tea and the blanket around her, it's like reality hits her. This is real. She's really trapped in this place. And there's a talking squirrel and a mean being with cat ears and tail, and Tina doesn't understand what's happening. And it all became too much and she began to cry. It must be a dream. I must be dreaming. Then Lynx leaned forward and pinched her. Ouch! What did you do that for? To see if you were dreaming or not. If you had been, you would have woken up by now. Ratatosk jumped up next to them. Why are you so mean? You've changed so much. And Lynx went quiet for a moment and then said, You would have changed too, if you would have been a collar on her coat. But you escaped her! You escaped! You are our hero! Lynx didn't reply, but Tina heard Fair murmur, Yeah, I escaped. But Ratatosk was too excited to stop. And now we have a chance! This is our savior, she's our hero! And with the two of you we stand a chance! We can try again! But Lynx just looked at her and said, There will be no second chance. And Tina looked between them, not understanding what they were talking about. But you promised to help me. Lynx didn't reply, and the comfort that Tina had felt earlier was slowly changing to fear. What would she do if Lynx wouldn't help her? Then she was stuck here in some strange world with some strange beings and didn't even know how to go home. And then there was some witch queen hunting her, and she didn't know what to do about that either. The tears fell down her face, and Ratatosk jumped up onto the chair next to her. You made her cry now! Shh! Lynx hushed at them, and Tina fell quiet. They're coming closer. They're sensing her. Tina was just about to ask who, when she heard the wolves howling in the distance again. She wrapped the blanket closer around her, and even Ratatosk went quiet. They won't find us tonight, Lynx said. Their senses are not that good. But we need to leave in the morning. This is not a safe place any longer. And Faye turned to Tina and said, I will help you, Ratatosk began to jump up and down. Yes, I believed in you. I knew you were good. You're our hero. Together we'll stand a chance. But Lynx just turned away from the window and said, we should go to bed. There's a long way in front of us tomorrow. And Faye left to prepare for the night. And when Lynx had left, Ratatosk jumped up on Tina's shoulder and whispered in her ear, Faye's a good person. Faye really is. Faye doesn't mean to be like that. Faye's just changed. But why? Tina asked. Faye escaped from the mines. What mines? And why was Faye there? And at that moment Lynx came out of the bedroom and said, because I trusted someone who fell from a tree. And Ratatosk looked at Faye. But you saved us! Both me and the others! Yeah, I did. Lynx didn't say anything else, but Faye seemed restless. But in the end, Faye just gestured towards the bedrooms and said, let's go to sleep. It's a long way ahead of us tomorrow. And so they went to bed. But Tina couldn't sleep. She lay on the bed that Lynx had made for her on the floor and thought about everything that had happened. She felt lonely in this strange world, lost and confused, and Lynx scared her a bit. And then there was Ratatosk. Ratatosk was nice, but Tina understood why Lynx said that she'd fallen from a tree. There was nothing bad about her, but definitely something different. Tina suspected she was kind of one of a kind among talking squirrels, and she began to cry again, lying there on the bed. But then she heard a door open, and Lynx came in to the room. Faye went over to Tina and lay down next to her. It's cold, Faye said. It was a bit strange, but Tina felt so good to have someone next to her, even if that person also was a bit strange. It was less lonely and she felt better already. She wanted to ask Lynx about this world and what it's all about, but Lynx pretended to be asleep. Tina knew that because she could feel Fairtail tickling her legs, but she decided not to say anything. She could ask Fair more questions tomorrow. And in the end, Tina fell asleep. In the morning, she woke up and went to the kitchen. Ratatosk and Lynx were already there, and Lynx must be in a foul mood in the morning, Tina thought, because even Ratatosk was quiet around Fair now. They ate breakfast, and then Lynx began rummaging through Fair's wardrobe, looking for clothes for Tina. When Faye found them, Faye threw them to Tina and said, put it on. It's a long way ahead of us and it will be cold. Where are we going? Where are we going? Said Ratatosk. We need to leave this place. The wolves will find it. But where are we going? And Lynx took a deep breath and then said, we're going to Old Bear. To Old Bear? For mushrooms? No, you will not eat mushrooms with him. But why Old Bear then? We'll need supplies for our journey. So where are we going? And Tina just looked between them. She didn't understand what was going on. We're going to the palace, Lynx said in the end. To the palace? But why? She'll be looking for her. Why are we going there? I don't want to become a collar on her coat. Ratatosk sounded miserable. And she'll take us to the mines as well. She will never expect that we go there. She'll think we'll hide, Lynx said. But why? Why the palace? Ratatosk sounded like she would cry now. But Ratatosk, you told me she's the hero. She's our savior. She will defeat the queen. This is your story. This is your dream. This is what we've been fighting for so long, and now the time has come to overthrow her, once and for all. Ratatosk looked up at Lynx with admiration, tears forgotten by now. You're back, Lynx! You're our hero! You're back! Let's go. They walked the whole day, and in the afternoon, Tina finally went up to Ratatosk and asked, But what am I supposed to do? You'll overthrow the queen! Just as the story said. You're the savior. You come from the land of sun. But I don't know how to. And Ratatosk went silent for a moment, as if this thought had just occurred to her when Tina said it. She jumped up on Lynx's shoulder and said, Lynx! Maybe she will need some practice. But on whom should she practice on? But maybe start with something simpler. Maybe she could just try her magic here. Don't be stupid. If she'll use her magic now, the queen will know we're here. And as Tina heard their conversation, there was a growing worry in her stomach. But I don't have any magic. What if I fail? But Lynx just looked at her. You have magic and you will not fail. You are our hero. You come from the land of the sun. And Faye turned and began to walk again. They kept walking, and when the sun had almost set, they arrived at the old bear's house. It was an old tree trunk made into a house. And this was his territory, his magic. Not even the wolves dared enter here. And he had sensed them coming, and stood by the door, welcoming them. Come in, come in. His house was full of herbs and jars and different potions. Tina saw pots boiling on the stove, and she was happy to be warm again. So you finally came to visit an old friend, Bear said to Lynx. It's been a long time. Yeah, Lynx said. We need supplies for our way. You don't even say hello to me in a proper way? Lynx, what happened to you? You know what happened to me. And who is she? Old Bear gestured to Tina. She seems so different from you, Lynx. She seems happy. Almost like Ratatosk. She is happy. You should learn from her. But Lynx ignored Old Bear and just went to sit down by the table. And Old Bear seemed to drop the subject for now and instead said, You must be hungry. I'll bring some food. And they sat down by the table and Lynx whispered to Tina, Don't eat the mushrooms. But Old Bear heard fair and said, But why not the mushrooms? They are so tasty. Yes, they can upset your stomach, but they are very tasty. Tina giggled as the Old Bear brought the food onto the table, and they began to eat. When they had finished, Old Bear sat down by the fire and began to tell them stories. There were stories about the sun and the flowers and the blue sky, and Ratatosk listened to them as hypnotized. But Lynx just stood up and said, I'm not a kid. I'll go to bed. And when Faye had left, Old Bear turned to Tina and asked, So, who are you? I've never seen you around. And Ratatosk jumped up and down excitedly in response and said, She came! She's the hero! All the signs were there just as you told me, and she came! And Old Bear turned to look at Tina surprised. Really? Did you come from the land of the sun? And Tina nodded. So the old stories are true then. And he went silent for a while, contemplating. I almost stopped believing in them, he said in the end. And what stories? Tina asked. And the Old Bear smiled and said, Stories about Queen of Summer coming back. But I'm not the queen. Maybe you just need some time. But Ratatosk got anxious. But we don't have time. We're going to the palace. Bear looked at her with worry. To the palace? Why? Lynx wants her to face the queen. Is that so? But she's just a girl. I know! But Lynx, Faye saved us. Faye saved all of us. Bear nodded his head. Yes, Faye did save us. So what happened? Tina asked. And with that, Old Bear leaned back in his chair and said, It's a long story. It started when the King of Wolves rebelled against the Queen. That day, we saw the sun shining in the sky for the first time in a long time. Yes, we saw it! It was a sign! Yes, Ratatosk, it was a sign. But there are many signs, and they can mean many different things. And he turned back to Tina. Many followed the king of wolves and refused to obey the queen. Lynx joined the fight and fought side by side with the king of wolves, uniting all of us. And for the first time in a very long time, there was hope. The snow melted, and the sun shone from a blue sky. So, what happened? Tina asked. The queen called on the goblins, and they came from their mines to fight for her. One night they broke our fortification and took many of us back with them. And the queen sent ravens with an ultimatum after that. We either surrendered to her, or our friends and family would never see the light again. And we were all so worried. What should we do? Give up the fight, or give up our loved ones? We met and talked and discussed the options, but couldn't agree on anything. And then, in the morning after, Lynx and the king of wolves were nowhere to be found. We looked everywhere, but no luck. Soon afterwards, our friends and family came back, and we realized what they'd done. They had gone to the queen and surrendered to her. And it wasn't long after that the queen forced the wolves to follow her as well. And they did. For fear of what would happen to their king if they didn't. And since that day, we've never seen the sun again.
Tell her the rest!
Yes, Ratatosk, I will tell the rest. 'Cause you see, he said to Tina, one day, many moons after they had disappeared, Lynx returned. Faye must have escaped, but no one knows how. No one escapes from the mines. But Faye's never talked about it. There's been one thing we noticed, and that is how Faye changed. Faye wasn't the same Lynx as before, and I'm afraid that a part of Fair is still in the mines. Tina felt sad hearing what had happened to Lynx, but Old Bear just said, "But I'm happy Faye's found a friend. Maybe you will help Fair find what Faye's lost." "But Lynx, she doesn't have any friends?" Tina asked. Bear laughed. "No, Faye pushed them all away. Only Ratatosk can stand Fair. But she is special, you know that. There's an old story too, about when she fell from a tree. But you look tired. Maybe you should go to bed. There will be other nights full of stories that will bring more light into your heart. Come, you can sleep safely here. Neither ravens nor wolves dare come to my place." And with that, they got up and Tina went to bed. And she went to lie down next to Lynx. "It's cold," she said. Lynx didn't reply, but Tina could feel Fair flickering tail tickling her legs. She smiled to herself and fell asleep. In the morning, Old Bear gave them enough supplies to get them on the journey, and they set out. As they walked, Tina thought about what Old Bear had told her, and she knew how to do something and help the others. She didn't know how yet, and she didn't know what it meant to overthrow the queen and her magic. But she decided that she would do something. She'd be like a lynx. She'd be strong. And they walked for many days, sleeping in empty tree trunks and nesting in the crowns of the giant oaks that lined the way. And as they went on, it got colder and colder, until one day Lynx said, "We're almost there." And Fate took them to the palace wall, and they began to climb it. Tina didn't see any guards, but Lynx had told them that the queen didn't need any. No one dared to disturb her. When they came up to the railing, Lynx led them to a hole in the palace wall that seemed to be a deserted tunnel. And Tina hesitated for a moment when But when both Ratatosk and Lynx crawled in, she followed. It was cold and eerily quiet, and she had to tell herself to be strong as Lynx, be brave like Lynx. And after some time, Tina heard Ratatosk whisper,
I see a light! We're almost there!
Lynx looked ahead with gritted teeth and set face. Good. Let's go. They crawled through the tunnel to the end and came out into a corridor. I know where we are, Lynx whispered. Come, follow me. And Faye began to run, stopping every other meter to make sure no one was around. And as they turned the corner, Faye halted and pointed to a door on the other side of the corridor. That's her room. Faye turned to Tina, looked her in the eyes and said, Remember what you promised me. And Tina nodded. She would do anything for Lynx if Faye could help her. Lynx cast one last look at her, then whispered, Let's go. And Faye began to walk towards the door, and as Faye came closer, it opened by itself, as if by magic. Lynx! Ratatosk whispered, but Lynx just kept walking, and both Tina and Ratatosk followed, not knowing what else to do. They walked through the door and came into a big hall with tall windows full of ice and white drapery coming down from the ceiling. And in the middle of the room stood the queen, smiling at them. So you came, Lynx, and you brought her, just as you were ordered to do. Ratatosk and Tina looked at Lynx, but Faye ignored them, and the queen turned to Ratatosk. And you brought your friend with you too. How nice of you. I didn't ask that of you, but I'm sure I will find a way to use her. I just need to make her quiet first. Lynx! Ratatosk started to back away, but the queen made a gesture with her hand and Ratatosk froze on the spot, unable to move anything else than her eyes. Tina watched it happening with fear. What's happening? Did Lynx betray them? She wanted to say something, but Lynx turned to her with cold eyes. Now, I call on your promise. Overthrow her! Tina stared at Lynx, and then at the queen, and back at Lynx. She had to do something, but what? She didn't understand what Lynx meant. She took a couple of steps towards the queen, but the queen just laughed. So this was your plan, Lynx. Very clever. Very clever indeed. But tell me, why would a promise to you force her magic out? Lynx looked around, unsure now. It hadn't worked as Faye thought it would. And then, with one last effort, Faye pulled the knife from Fair's belt and ran towards the queen. Run! Faye cried at Tina, but the queen just rose her hand and pointed at Lynx. Lynx, Lynx, do you really think I'll let you escape without taking your name? Lynx froze, but before Tina could see what happened next, she felt Ratatosk whisk past her. The squirrel jumped up on the queen and scratched and bit her face. The queen's spell must have lost its power when she concentrated on Lynx, Tina thought. The queen stumbled around as she tried to get Ratatosk off her. How dare you, the dirty little squirrel! Run! Ratatosk squealed at Tina, and Ratatosk's voice brought Tina back and she looked around. Lynx? Where is Lynx? Where had Faye gone? And then she saw that on the ground where Lynx had stood was now a cat, a bit wobbly. Tina didn't think, just grabbed it, and with one last look at Ratatosk, she ran from the hall. And she came out to the corridor, and all around them were screams and animal noises and beings running through the palace. Tina had never seen so many animals, but none of them seemed to notice her. They must have been set free when the queen concentrated on Lynx, just like Ratatosk, Tina thought. She ran down the corridor with Lynx the cat in her arms, when she suddenly heard the howling of wolves in the distance. She froze. The queen must have called on them. But then something bumped into her from behind and she stumbled, almost dropping Lynx. But she came back to her senses and began running down the corridor again. And she sprinted past doors and parallel corridors, not knowing where to go or how to escape. And it felt like the wolves were getting closer, and she imagined them running behind her, almost catching up with them. And she turned a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. There, some distance away, was an old dog, making his way towards them. And Tina hesitated. It wasn't the wolf, she could see that, but she wasn't sure if it was friendly. As it came closer, she could see it was limping and badly ragged. Maybe it was okay. She stayed put as it came up to them and spoke. "Follow me. I'll show you the way out." Tina hesitated, but there was something about the dog that made her trust it. She looked back one last time at the corridor and then turned to follow the dog. And he led them away from the sound and the noise of the running animals, and soon even the howling of the wolves faded away. As they came to a small gate by the end of the corridor, he turned to them and said, "Behind this gate is the forest. You will be safe there." "But what about my friend Ratatosk? I can't leave her." But the dog just shook his head. "You can't save her now." "And Lynx, what happened to Fair?" The dog looked at the shaken and wobbly Lynx in Tina's arms. "The queen took Fair name." "Fair name? What do you mean? Please, you need to help me." But the dog just looked at her with sad eyes. "I cannot help you anymore. She'll be punishing me for this already. You need to go. You need to find Fair name." "But how?" Tina didn't know what to do. Lynx was a cat in her arms and Ratatosk was lost with the queen. But the dog looked at her and she realized there was something strange with him, because his eyes were the ones of a wolf. But before she could ask, he pushed the gate open and said, "Now go, bring the sun back." And Tina sprinted out, leaving the palace, Ratatosk and the queen behind her. And she ran through the forest with Lynx the cat in her arms, not knowing where to go but wanting to get as far away from the palace as she could. And only when she was too out of breath to keep running did she stop and try to calm down. "Lynx, what shall we do?" she asked. But Faye didn't answer, just looked like a normal cat. Maybe she's in shock, Tina thought. I'll have to worry about that later. What would Lynx do now? Tina thought. Lynx would have looked for a safe place in the trees. And Faye had told them about the many tree houses in the forest. They came from the time of the rebellion, when people needed somewhere safe to hide. So with Lynx the cat still in her arms, Tina set out looking for one. There were many of them, she soon discovered, but most of them were too broken to be livable. But in the end, she found one that at least had 4 walls still, and the roof. She climbed up, making sure Lynx the cat was safe in her arms as she ascended. Once up, she put Lynx the cat down, and then sat down on the floor. Faye had said nothing the whole way, and Tina wondered if maybe this cat spell also meant that Faye couldn't talk. Or maybe Faye had transformed into a cat and didn't even remember Faye was Lynx. The cat known as Lynx responded to her thoughts by hissing at Tina, running to the door, scratching to get out. And Tina began to cry. What was she doing here? Alone in the forest with a cat that didn't remember Faye was Lynx and Ratatosk was left in the palace. How would she sort this? "I'm sorry, Lynx, I failed you. I didn't know what to do. I know I promised to help you, but I didn't know how to overthrow her. I'm sorry." Lynx the cat stopped scratching on the door, but kept sitting with Fair back towards Tina, waiting to get out. "Have you really forgotten who you are? Do you understand what I'm saying?" But Lynx just ignored Tina, Or Faye really had forgotten who Faye was, and now was just a cat waiting to get out, because Faye didn't respond. Please, come back to me, it's cold, and I'm lonely, Tina tried. And she went over and picked Faye up, and this time Lynx didn't hiss, but just let it be. And Tina went to sit down again, put Lynx the cat on their lap, and said, I will find a way, and I will find your name, I promise. I will not fail you this time. I just don't know how yet. Lynx just licked Faye's paws in response, like a normal cat. You really don't understand me, do you? And Lynx the cat didn't respond, just kept licking Faye's paws. I will take care of you, Tina said. And I will find a way. I will save you, and I will save Ratatosk and the Wolf King and everyone. I just need to find out how. And so she sat there in the treehouse shelter, cuddling Lynx and speaking out loud. But whether to Lynx or herself, she didn't really know. Lynx, what would you have done in my place? You're so strong, I admire you. What would you have done now? How can I find your name? I don't know anyone to ask here for it. But just as she said it, she realized she did know someone. She knew Old Bear. Could she find him? She had to try. So she said to Lynx that tomorrow we'll find Old Bear. He's old and he has many stories. He must know what to do. And she lay down, and it was lonely to just have Lynx's cat there. But in the end, she did fall asleep. She woke up the next day, Lynx still in her arms, and they set out. She didn't know where they were, nor where Old Bear was, but she walked through the forest in the direction that they had come from the day before. They walked for a long time, not seeing anything else than trees. Lynx still hadn't said anything, but Tina kept speaking to Faye the whole day, as if Faye understood. It made her feel better, less lonely. But they walked and walked, and when Tina was almost ready to give up their search, Lynx jumped from her arms, hissed, and disappeared into the forest. No, Lynx! Come back, Lynx! Tina ran after Faye, but she only managed to take a couple of steps when she realized that she's standing in front of Old Bear's tree. She looked around. What happened? How did she end up here? She heard the door open, and Old Bear came out with surprise on his face. Well, come in, come in. There's no good standing out here. Tina walked over to him, still in a daze. But what happened? How did I find this place? If you really want to find me, you will. That's part of my magic. And then he looked around as if suddenly realizing something. What's happened? Where are the others? And Tina began to cry and told him the story of the palace and the queen, and how Ratatosk had attacked her, and how the queen had turned Lynx into a cat. And now she had to find Lynx's name, but she didn't know how or even what it meant. Oh dear, you better come inside. And he led her into the house and poured her a cup of strong tea. Then he sat down and said, So it didn't go as Faye expected. Tina shook her head, still crying. But I don't understand what happened. Bear leaned back in his chair, thinking. It looks like the Witch Queen allowed Faye to run away last time. But not before she'd put a spell on Faye. She must have wanted to use Lynx as a spy. Because if you would ever come to this world, and someone would have found you, they would have taken you to Lynx. Just what happened. Faye's still an official leader. And in that case, Lynx would have been forced to take you to her. But Faye tried to overthrow the queen. Yes, spells are not almighty, And I guess Faye tried to manipulate in the best Faye could. But it didn't work. And what should I have done? I don't have any magic. Magic isn't as easy as just waving a wand, Bear said. You will find it. But Lynx must have hoped Faye could force it out of you. Silly Lynx. And Tina felt more and more hopeless. And what about her name? What does it even mean? And why would the Witch Queen take it? That's old magic. If your name is taken, you are bound to the person until you get it back. But how do we find it? I need to give it back to Fair. But Bear said, if the witch took it, then only she can give it back. And Tina began to cry again harder. But I promised Fair that I would find it. I have to give it back to Fair. And Faye's just a cat. A cat! Oh, Faye will be even angrier with me now. Old Bear looked at her. I don't think Faye's angry with you. I think Faye's ashamed of what Faye's done. Tina stopped crying and looked at him in surprise. But Faye's done nothing wrong. Faye tried to use you. But Faye had no other choice. And Faye tried to save us. That might be true, but still. The witch bound Fair with a spell, and Lynx must have suspected it. And you were Fairchance. Faye's just too ashamed to speak to you. Tina looked at him, bewildered. Speak? Faye can speak? Of course Faye can. The witch just took Fair's name, not who Faye is. But let's not worry about that now. It's getting late, and it's time for bed. Maybe tomorrow we'll have some ideas about what to do. There must be something we can do that will give Fair back Fair's name. And Tina went to bed, and as she lay there, she heard something scratching on the window. She went to open it, and Lynx the cat was standing there. Faye jumped onto the bed and said, It's cold. Tina ran to Fair on the bed. You speak! I was afraid that you had turned into a normal cat. She hugged Fair, but Lynx just said, You're strangling me. Tina looked at Fair. I'm not angry with you, Lynx. Can we be friends again? Lynx looked up at her, and Fair cat face was one of surprise. You're not angry with me? After everything I've done, you still want to be my friend? Yes, I'm not angry with you. And I failed you too, but it doesn't matter. Now we have each other again, and that's what's important. I'm gonna find a way, for you and for everyone. I'll save you. I meant everything I said to you. Lynx cuddled up against Tina, and soon they fell asleep. The next morning they woke up and went to the kitchen together, and old Bear served them breakfast. And he said, I've been thinking about this. There might be someone who can help you. In the hills, north of the forest, there's a lake, and in this lake lives a fish that is even older than me. And I believe she's always stayed underwater and is out of reach of the Queen's magic. She may know things that no one else does. Lynx and Tina looked at each other, and Lynx said, Well, let's go there first then. Maybe the old fish will know more secrets. Maybe she can teach you how to use your magic too, and she must remember the days when the sun was still shining. So the decision was made, and Old Bear gave them provisions on the way, and they set out. And they walked for many days, until one morning they saw a lake in the distance. When they came to the shore, though, they looked out over it and realized it was an enormous lake. How do we find a fish here? Tina asked. Shall I swim? She turned to Lynx, but before she was around, she heard Fair hissing, and from the surrounding bushes, wolves emerged. It won't be necessary to swim, the leader of the wolves said. The Queen knew you would come here. Where else would you come for secrets no one else knows about? It was so obvious. He shook his head. Just a little girl, that's what you are. Lynx hissed at them, but the wolf turned to Fair with a patronizing smile. And you? Did you plan to run and abandon your other friend too? He turned to the wolf pack. Let's go. The queen is waiting. And they didn't have any other choice than to follow. So with Lynx in her arms, Tina walked with the wolves back to the palace. But it was a long way, and Tina knew it would take them many days to reach it. She hugged Lynx and whispered, It will be okay. We will find a way. They walked the whole day, and when the night came, they stopped to rest. Tina and Lynx found a hole in an old tree trunk where they crawled in, and the wolves guarded them from the outside. Lynx crawled up in Tina's arms and said, I'm sorry, I should have known better. And don't be sorry, Lynx, it's not your fault. And we'll find a way, I'm sure we will. But Lynx shook Fair head and said, It's too late. She got us. It's hopeless. Tina hugged Fair. But we have each other still. And what if she separates us? Lynx asked. She can send us away. But I will still love you, Tina said. I only wish I could give you a name. I would name you Leah. And with that, Lynx cuddled up against her, and they soon fell asleep. And Tina was woken up by someone shaking her arm. She opened her eyes and saw that it was almost dawn, and Lynx, in fair human form, crouched next to her with a big smile. Let's go, Faye whispered. What happened? Tina asked. Shh, later. Let's go. But the wolves. Let's have fun with the wolves. And they crawled out from the tree, and Leah Lynx turned to the sleeping wolves and cried out, Fleabags! Come here! The wolves woke up and walked towards them, looking at them in shock. The Queen of Summer is back, Leah Lynx announced. You're free to run, or to follow us to your queen to watch her fall. The wolves looked at each other, terrified because they'd never imagined the day would come when the queen would fall. And they ran. Some of them back to the queen. Some of them back to the forest, happy they didn't need to serve any longer. And Tina looked at Leah Lynx. But what happened? How did you come back to your human form? You're the Queen of Summer. You gave me a name and you meant it. Tina looked at Fair and blushed. She had meant it. She'd meant everything she said to Leah Lynx. But it was different having said it to a cat and now having the human standing in front of her. But she would stand by it. She loved Leah Lynx. Yeah, I meant it, she said. They took each other's hands and walked back to the palace. And as they walked, the snow melted around them and the sun came out from the clouds. As they came closer, they saw that where the palace had once stood was now only a big lake. They heard something rattling behind them, and a high-pitched voice peeped. You saved us! You saved us! I told you you would save us! I knew it! You're our hero! I didn't fall from a tree! Ratatosk ran towards them and jumped up on Leah Lynx's shoulder. You're our heroes, both of you! I'm so happy! What happened to the queen? Tina asked. Everything melted in the morning, and we all ran. We? Tina asked. And then she saw some beings and animals coming towards them. And they all looked very sad, but there was also hope in their eyes. And Leah Lynx whispered into Tina's ear, You need to give them a name. But I don't know their names, Tina whispered back. But Leah Lynx just smiled and said, You will know. You will know when they come. And each of these beings came up to Tina. And every time one came up, she knew what name to give them. And she gave them the new name and one by one they took their true form. And the old dog became the Wolf King again, and all the beings were free. And then the Wolf King walked up to Tina and said, "I heard an old story too. If you go into the lake, you will come back to the place where you came from." But Tina looked at Ratatosk and Lealix and said, "I will stay here." And they walked together, holding hands, and later held a big celebration because the summer had come.